This training class will talk about the iSite Essentials module within iSite. And Essentials are the basic functionality that is provided to all iSite customers. Essentials will revolve around document libraries and list functionality, as well as our admin tools. So to start out, we'll navigate over to document libraries. Document libraries is essentially a web-based function that allows you to store documents in a folder hierarchy within iSite. This obviates the need for having something such as a corporate file server that you have to get on the VPN to access or whatnot. So we provide you these document libraries right within iSite, and we allow you to create multiple libraries to organize information accordingly. So I can create as many libraries as I want. In each of those libraries, I can also create a folder hierarchy that makes sense to me. So I can create as many libraries and folders as I want. It's important to note that each of these libraries and folders can have a security profile attached to them, or what we call an audience. So that I can lock down a specific library or folder, or even a folder item, such as a document, to specific users or security groups within iSite. So this is a nice way for you to lock down specific regions of your document libraries to certain security groups, such as if you have financial information, you may only want people in your financial security groups to have access to those libraries, folders, or documents, and you can go ahead and do that. So the basic structure of a document library, we have our toolbar at the top. This allows you to do basic functionality within the library itself. From here, I can go ahead and add a new document or link. When I add a document, I'm basically specifying the name and title of this document, and then I'm uploading a file at the same time. For a link, I can actually create a link right in my document library folder that might be relevant to the users, and it might be something like an external reference website or whatnot. You can add right to your specific document library right from here. I can also add a folder, so whatever folder I'm currently in, it'll add a folder to, and then of course I can add a top-level library right from this menu here. If I wanted to download a series of items at once, first of all, I can download any file just by clicking on the link. It'll download it right to my browser. But if I want to download multiple files, I can select one or more of those files with checkboxes, click the Download Items button, and then each of those files will be downloaded and stored on my local hard drive. Same thing goes with deletion. I select checkboxes of the items that I want to delete, click the Delete Items button, and then those files will be permanently removed from the iSite document library. The refresh button basically just allows me to refresh the view that I'm looking at if there's a need to do so. My options button allows me to control the display. So if I want to turn off item descriptions, you'll notice I have item descriptions here. I can turn that off. I can also turn off file status, which is my right-hand column here. And then I can turn off my folder hierarchy display, which is listed here if I want. So it just cleans up the display a little bit if I want to. Lastly, on my toolbar, I have a search function. So if I, let's just say I search on test, iSite will search not only file names, but also it'll search within the files of certain file types, such as text documents, Word documents, PDFs, for specific strings that match what you type here in the search text box. So it'll find whatever files match that search criteria. Okay, so let's talk about a library. If I want to add a new library, very simple. I click on New, go to New Library. I can go ahead and give it a name. We'll call this a test library. Give it a description if I want. And then it gives me a chance to say if I want to turn on document version control. What this means is if I enable version control on a document library, then when I add files to my library and then I want to make changes to those files, I would have to check that file out, which locks the file so nobody else can do anything with it, make my changes, and then check that file back in. So once I upload it, I check it back in, and now what iSite will do is we'll create a new version of that file, and you'll be able to see the version history of that document, of that specific document as well. So if you wanted to look at the version history, revert back to an older version, you could do that. I can also control the security of this library. By default, all users will have access to the library, but if I want to lock that down, I choose this option, select one or more security groups that will have access to this library, and then I'm done with it. Within a library itself, I can go ahead and create a folder. So by creating a folder, same type of thing occurs. I can give this folder a name. Say my folder. Same thing applies here with security. I can expose this to all users or only specific security groups. I'll just leave this as all users. And then once I'm in a folder, I could do a couple things. So if I wanted to add a document, I can go ahead and add a document from my new menu. Let's just say we'll call this my test document. I can give it a file status. Okay. Then I just click upload and I'm good to go. If I wanted to, I can also add files to the folder that I'm looking at by dragging those files from my desktop. So if I wanted to open up a folder and drag a series of files, I can drag all of them into this little region here, and it'll automatically upload those files to the directory that I'm looking at. Of course, by default, it'll give the security will be for all users. It will not prompt you for each file to give it a name and to specify which security profile that you want. It's going to give it a default name and description, and it's going to allow access to all users. If you want to change it after the fact, you can go ahead and do so. So I've created a library, I've created folders, I've created documents. I can create a link as well. Let's just say I'm in a folder and I wanted to create a quick link that is relevant to the folks that are looking at this specific folder. Rather than having them go elsewhere, I can actually provide a very quick link for them. So let's just call this that. Create that hyperlink. Now I actually have a link right to Google if I want to here. So it's a nice handy way to provide some informational links within a specific folder if I want. So I was able to create a library, a folder, a document, and a link. Well, now if I want to modify any of those, I can go ahead and click this down arrow here and go to the properties of this specific item I'm looking at. So if I go back up here, I can do that on a folder. Okay. Again, I can change the name, description, and security. I can do it on a file item. Okay. And if I right mouse click on the library itself, I can actually do it on the library itself. Okay, if I want to delete anything, again, same thing. I can click my checkboxes, click delete items. Another thing I can do, if I click my down arrow, I can actually delete a specific item this way. Of course, if I'm deleting a folder, it's going to delete everything in that folder, including additional folders and folder items. So it's important to keep that in mind. Same thing for documents. I can delete a series of documents at once. I can also delete the file or the link by by clicking the download and then clicking the delete file option. By right mouse clicking on a library, I can delete the library if I want to. Okay, a couple other options. When I'm in a library, if I click this down arrow, this will give me all the options that are available for the folder that I'm looking at. So I can open the folder, which will basically drill into it. I can delete it, or I can go to properties. Same thing when I'm in a document, there are various items that are listed here. I can open the file, which will basically download the file to my browser. I can choose to email that file, and if I want to email it, I can basically just specify, do I want to email it to myself? Do I want to email it to other users? Do I want to email it to external addresses? So forth. I can do that. And then what will happen is a link to this file will be emailed to the people that you specify. I mention a link because rather than sending a file, the link is more efficient, and they'll be able to link directly to this file right within iSite. You'll also notice some checkout and some version history functionality. So what that tells me is this library that we're in actually has version control turned on. If I go into my library properties, you'll notice version control is turned on. Okay, so that's why when I was in this area here, excuse me, when I was in this area here, it showed that I could check out these files. Now, if this file was already checked out, it would tell me. So obviously, if it's checked out and I'm not the person who's checked it out, I couldn't really do anything. I could look at the file as it was when it was last checked in, but I can't do anything with it. So in a version controlled document library, one thing that might be interesting to me is the version history. So if I click on that, let's just see what there is for version history. So it looks like there's only one version, and that was the original document that was uploaded because I just uploaded it. But if I wanted to check out that file, make some changes to it, I could do one of two things. If I already have the file located on my file system, I don't need to check it out, download it again. I could just mark it as checked out and then do what I want. And you'll notice there that it shows that it's checked out to me. Now, if I was somebody else and I was logging in and looking at this this folder, this library, it would show that it's checked out to me, but these items here, this check-in and undo checkout, would not be available. The only thing I could do is view version history, open it, email it, and so forth. But I couldn't make any changes to it. So now that I have it checked out, I want to go ahead and check in the file. Now, if I do undo checkout, all that's basically going to do is going to release that lock, and whatever the file is currently will be the file going forward. But if I want to change that, if I want to check it in with some changes, I click check in. If I want to give it some comments, and then I'll go ahead. Now I can choose to keep this file checked out if I want to. Let's just say I want to just check it in and I want to just keep a version of it, but I'm still working on it, I can do that. Otherwise, if I don't want to keep it checked out, I just click no here, which is the default. So I'll check in this file. Now you'll see that check-in indicator is gone. If I go back to my version history, you'll see now there's two different versions here. And if I had made changes to this document, you'd see a different version of these documents here if I wanted to. Okay, so that basically covers the basic functionality within document libraries within iSite. To recap, the document library functionality is a nice web-based utility to allow you to store libraries, folders, and folder items, including links, so that they are centrally managed. And again, this obviates the need of having that file server that you have to VPN into and so forth. Next thing I want to cover is lists. Lists, we provide two separate types of lists here in iSite. System lists control display of functionality within the iSite homepage and other areas within iSite. System lists, this tab that I'm showing here, will only be visible if I am a user who has the permissions to manage the iSite Essentials functionality. If I don't have that permission on my security profile, then I wouldn't even see this system list function here. These system lists area, announcements, events, and links all control things that you'll see on the home page. So announcements are listed here. They're always listed up on top. Events are listed in the upper right-hand corner with a calendar. You'll see system-generated events, and then you'll also see events that your administrators will create if you're looking at a month where an event exists. And then links down at the bottom here can be created as quick access links to relevant information. Again, nicely available on your home page. So if I go back to lists, I'll go into the basic functionality of lists itself. When I'm managing uh, any of my system lists, I'm going to have the same kind of situation as you see here. I'll have a toolbar that allows me to add a new record or delete selected records. If I want to delete records, I simply just select one or more checkboxes, click the delete button, and then it'll ask me if I want to go ahead and delete that or not. If I want to add a new record, simply click the add new record button, and then I can go ahead and add a new announcements to this list here. I do have the ability to add formatting to my announcements, so if I have bold and italics, underline, a couple of the different formats, I can have that. For an announcement, I can specify a start and expiration date, and then if I want to mark the announcement as urgent, it'll basically color code that announcement on the home page. Once I'm done, I click create, and it'll create that announcement for me. If I hit cancel, it'll bring me out to the list. Same thing if I click this list button, it'll bring me out to the list. That same concept is the same for all of these. So I'll have the same toolbar. This one actually has a search. I'll have links. Again, that same toolbar. If I click into one of these, that'll allow me to edit it, if I add it, and so forth. Now, editing, I just simply click on the title, and that'll bring me into the editor. I can go ahead and make any kind of changes that I want here to this specific record. That same thing applies for my events and my links as well. So it's important to note that these system lists control the display on our home page here. Now, custom lists, on the other hand, this is a little bit different. So our custom list in iSite basically allows you to create your own data structure to manage within iSite. So iSite has quite a few data structures built into it itself. So, I showed you document libraries. Each of these modules has their own set of tables that store information. Same thing for tasks, timekeeping, and so forth. But there may be an instance where you want to capture information that iSite doesn't provide you out of the box. So in that instance, we have provided you with this really cool tool called a custom list. This custom list allows you to define a data structure, which is a series of columns that you define that hold specific pieces of information. And then you add data to this list by basically adding a record or adding a row of data that makes up those specific columns. So typically what you might have used in the past to manage lists of information might be an Excel spreadsheet, or maybe it's an Access database. Well, that's fine, and file-based lists have their purpose as well, but a data-driven list also has additional functionality that you could take advantage of. I can lock down certain information to certain people. I can turn on version control. I can export this data to other areas. I can report off of this data. So while file-based lists, again, do have their place, the custom list functionality gives you a lot more functionality and flexibility than those file-based solutions. So going back out to my lists, if I wanted to create a new list, it's very simple. I click the Create List button. I provided a name and description, and it'll create a very basic list for me. Once my list is created, I can then go ahead and go into my properties and list, or go into the list properties and manage the list itself, the structure. So if I want to, let's go into list properties. So I can control the columns that are available, the views, we'll touch on that in a minute, version control, advanced settings, and audience. First thing that I'll want to do when I'm working with a list is I want to define the types of information that I am going to track on a record-by-record basis. Again, if you use the Excel approach, just consider those as your column headers, okay, or your items across the top. So I've already created a couple here. Let me just add another couple columns here. So we'll call it begin date, And these are my different data types that I can choose from here. I'm dealing with a date, so I'll choose a date. If I want to give it a description, this will actually be a help indicator when somebody is entering data into a record. I can go ahead and display that here. So enter the beginning. I can also determine whether or not this this column requires information. So sometimes I can allow, I don't really need the data. Sometimes I need to require it. I can go ahead and turn that on here. And then if I want to give it a default value, I can do that. So if I don't want to give it one, I'll just leave it as none. If I want to say, hey, whenever I'm dealing with a new record, just use the current date as the default, or I can even give it a hard-coded date if I want to. Okay, so I've created this column. Let me go ahead and add another one called end date. Give that date. Sure, that'll be required. Enter. No default value needed. And let's just say we'll add another column called subject. And this one I might want to give a series of choices. So I'll just choose choice, add a drop-down list. I don't need a description. So these are my choices. You'll notice that each choice is on a separate line as it's required. Do I want to allow a fill-in choice, meaning excuse me, allowing them to select something that's not in my list? No, I don't think I need to do that, so I'll leave that as no. And then I'll say my default value is going to be subject A. All right, so I basically created a list with 5 different columns. You'll notice from here, if I wanted to delete some columns, I could do that. If I wanted to go into a column and change the definition, I could click on that column and allow me to change a couple of things here. I want to call that subject name. Okay. To delete a column, I can select one or more of these, click delete, and it'll ask me if I'm sure I want to do that. You'll notice I can't select the title column. The title column is a standard column, and it has to remain within a list. I can certainly rename it. I can give it a different name if I want to. If I want to call it, my item title, I can certainly do that. But that column, which is represented as a title, cannot be deleted. I'll just change that back. Okay, so I've defined some columns. So let's see what else I can do with this list here. So, oh, there's one thing I wanted to touch on, column indexing. So because we're dealing with a database-driven list, we're not dealing with a file any longer. I can actually perform searches on my list. And to make searching easy, I can add indexes to my columns. So by default, I have title and status turned on as an index. If I want to say, hey, include begin date, so if I'm searching by a date, it'll search these values, which will be a lot faster than if I search other things or raw content. So I can add indexes on up to 10 different fields within each custom list. So now let's go to views. So what are views within a list? Views allow me to create different looks at my data. So by default, an all items view is created, which basically will display all of your columns in the list itself. I can choose to turn on and off these items if I want to. And excuse me, I can lock down a view to specific security groups. So maybe I want a view that I'm creating that maybe exposes some sensitive information, but I only want that view to be visible by certain groups. I can set an audience on that view, and now those folks can only see those folks can see that those columns that I'm exposing if I want to. So this basically just gives me a way to define different ways that I want to present this information. So I just created this view earlier called just title, and that's basically going to do just that. It's only going to show the title in both the viewer and the list itself. Okay, but if I wanted to create a different view, let's just say I wanted to create a view, it's called My View. It includes the title, which has to be there, of course, but also includes the status, and we'll say both, and end date. Okay, and I can change the order of that. So I want status to be afterwards. So I'll say this is 3. I'll say this is 2. So now I've created a new view called My View, and I'll leave it so all users can have access to that view. And so those are 3 different views, and we'll show you how those work a little bit later. Versioning, again, I can determine whether or not I want version control turned on within my list. So if I have version control turned on, then anytime I change a record, it's going to keep a version of that record, and you'll see how that specific record has changed over time. Very similar to what document libraries are like. And then whether or not I want to turn on content approval when somebody adds an item. If I turn on content approval, then basically what that means is when they create the record, it's in draft status, and folks won't be able to see that item until that item has been approved and is considered final. So the only people that would be able to see that draft is the person who is controlled by this list. So if I want anybody to view them, I can say, yeah, let's go ahead. Anybody can view draft items. I can also say, hey, only people who can edit items can see draft items. And then I can also say only people who can approve items can see draft items. So if I'm not one of those folks and somebody creates an item and content approval is turned on, then I wouldn't even see this item until it's been approved. And then I can turn on who's allowed to approve these items. Again, that's controlled by security group here. On my advanced settings, I'm going to turn this off here. On my advanced settings, this basically controls read and edit access to the items in the list. So if I want to say, hey, I can only read items that I've created myself, I can do that, or I can read items that anybody has created. I can do that as well. Same thing for edit. I may want to allow someone just to be able to create items and not view anything. I may want people to edit items only that were created by that person. So if I created an item, only that person can edit that item. Or I can just say by default, anybody who has access to edit can go ahead and edit any item. I may also want to enable attachments, which will allow me to upload a document with each record that I create in my list, which could be handy. So you can create one or more documents that might be relevant to the list item that's being created. And then lastly, I can turn on audience capabilities again for my list. So who's able to view my list, who can contribute to my list, meaning they can add, edit, or delete items. This is, of course, is in addition to the person who owns the list. And then who can administer my list, meaning who can add new columns, who can add views, who can do things like that. Those can all be controlled by security groups. By default, anybody who has access to custom lists can do this. Do these functions. But if I want to lock those down, I have that ability here. So let's go ahead and update this. Now you'll see I have my list here. If I want to add a new record, I can go ahead and do so. So let me go ahead and add a record. Before I do that, actually, I want to show you one thing. We talked about views before. So you'll notice because there's more than one view selected or created, I have a view selector here. These are the different views that I have defined. So all items view is what's currently being displayed now. If I want to change that to that just title view, you'll see that's all that's displayed in this view. And if I go to click on it, right, because I'm only exposing title, that's all I can change in this view. Okay. Same thing with the view we just created called My View. I created the end date and the status. You'll notice the order that we set. If I want to edit that, those are the only fields that I can edit. You'll notice this help information here that we included as well. Okay, so let's go back to all items, and that's our default view. So if I want to edit an item, again, I just simply click on it. I can change its value. Let's give this a date here. And subject B, that sounds good. Save it. And now that'll update. You'll also notice there's a, because this list has attachments turned on, there is a, excuse me, an attachments column here. So let's just say if I go back to my item 1 here and I add an attachment, go ahead and do that. Save it. Okay. Now you'll notice there's an indicator there saying that an item exists. So if I go into there, you'll see the attachments tab is lit up. There's one attachment there. Delete me. If I want to remove it, I can do that. Click back in it. You'll also notice I can view the history of a list item here. So here we're showing that a record was changed a couple different times here. So this one was when the record was created. Here is where I changed some values, the name, the date. If I wanted to revert back to that version and change the values to match whatever that version was, I click this link here and it does that. The third item is when I added attachments, so no changes were actually made to the fields, but I just added an attachment here. That's basically that. Okay, so that basically covers lists in the Essentials function. One other thing I wanted to show you, I do have the ability to import and export records. If I'm exporting records, basically it's going to take this list and create an Excel spreadsheet, as you'll notice down here. So it's basically for every column that I create, you'll have a column in Excel. For every row that I have, you'll have items in each of those rows. I also have the ability to import data. So it's going to give me a template that I can follow. And again, that data basically must be in tab separated format. And then I can basically import tens, hundreds, thousands of records at once if I want, rather than having to go through the editor and creating each record manually. So when I'm importing, I can choose to append or replace those records if I want to, and it gives you a little indicator of what that means here. And that basically covers the custom lists functionality. Okay, next thing we'll cover is the admin functions, which is the final piece of the Essentials functionality within iSite. We'll start with security. Security basically allows you to manage the users, security groups, and the security profile of the folks within your iSite instance. So by going to manage users, I'll be able to list all the users that are available in the system here. And just like anything else, the toolbar is very self-explanatory. I can add a new user by clicking that button, delete users by selecting one or more of these users and then clicking the delete button. I can choose to import users if I want, which will allow me to import a series of users from an external source. So those would have to be in a tab delimited file format. And then when I'm importing, I have some options. Once the import is complete, I can have an email sent to those users with their logon credentials. I can force that they change their password when they first log on. And then I can determine whether or not those users are considered active or not. That's how I would import a user. When I go back here, I can also perform a bulk password reset. What that does is it allows me to select a series of users that I want to reset passwords for. So let's just say at the beginning you create a bunch of users, but you don't necessarily want to send out credentials to them at that point in time, their emails with their credentials. So you can set them up, but then later when you're ready to use the system, you can simply just perform this bulk password reset. It'll reset all their passwords to something random, and then it will go ahead and email them what their new default password is. And it will require them to change that password on first logon. You can also choose to include or attach a help document to that email that is sent out if I so choose. So if I want to include a help document, I could go ahead and do that. I can choose one or more of these help documents, and now that document will also be included in that password reset email. When I'm in a user, I can show you some of the different functionality that you can control. So first of all, the obviously name, email address, location, phone numbers, and whatnot, whether their user is active or not, and whether or not they must change their password at next logon. I can also define extended properties for a user. We won't touch on that just yet, but if I have created those, those would be available here as well. As far as authentication, we can go ahead and allow multiple ways to get into iSite. So if I use web authentication, that means that's a custom user ID and password. The user ID would be their email address. The password would be generated right here in iSite. If you have SharePoint functionality enabled, I can enable SharePoint credentials and SharePoint access for this specific user. And then same thing for single sign-on. If we have single sign-on turned on, I can enable this user to access single sign-on. I may do something even like this where I'm forcing them to only use single sign-on. So if they tried to get on using the web browser, using the custom user ID and password, it wouldn't let them. Next thing I have available, these are the security groups that I want to assign to this user. We'll touch on security groups in a second, but basically security groups will control or will house the permissions for each of those groups, and then I can assign one or more of those groups to users. So based on the permissions that are assigned to those groups, and the groups that are assigned to this user, that's the permissions that this user will have within the system. Based on what is saved, if I want to view what their effective permissions are, I can go ahead and click on that little link down there, and it's going to basically show me all the things that that person is allowed to do. For task membership, I can control which tasks within the iSite portal that they're allowed to access. So I can say they're not allowed to view anything. They're only allowed to view tasks if they're associated with a task role or a contract role. We'll touch on those a little bit later. I can view all tasks, or I can view specific tasks. Same thing for task groups, and again, we'll touch on that, what that means a little bit later. But I can control what kind of access they have to task groups. And then lastly, if this person is assigned to a timekeeping group, you can control some of their timekeeping settings here as well. So I can assign them a workflow for approval of their timesheets. I can specify what their normal working days are. I can specify whether time entries required on holidays or not, what the hour types are that are assigned to them. And then I can turn on or off any automated notifications regarding timekeeping for this specific user. On the Jobs tab, I can assign one or more timekeeping jobs as well. And when I'm doing that, basically that allows them to charge time to whatever jobs they're assigned to. So I can add or I can remove jobs accordingly. While I'm in this user, I can do a couple other things. I can choose to reset their password, okay, which will basically give me the option to randomly generate a new password for them and then send an email to them with this new password. Again, I can go ahead and include a help document to do this, and then I can just specify whether or not they must change their password on next logon, and that, of course, is encouraged. The other thing I can do while I'm in a user is I can perform this assume identity function. And what that allows me to do is it allows me to be logged on as that user without actually having to ask them for their user ID and password, which you should never do. This is useful for troubleshooting and is also useful to determine whether or not when you're done setting up this user, they have access to the correct menu options and correct functions within the tool itself. It's only available to security administrators, and it's a great troubleshooting tool, and it definitely helps out in ensuring that you've defined a user appropriately. You didn't give them too much access, or you want to make sure that you didn't give them enough access. So if they're missing things, you want to make sure you give them access to the things that they need access to. That's the assume identity function. When you go ahead and assume an identity, I'm going to go ahead and assume this person's identity. You'll notice how the menus have changed. My home page has changed. Everything has changed. I'm basically now logged on as this user here. And you'll see that in my utility bar, the highlight of the user has changed. And so forth. When I'm done with this user and I'm done troubleshooting, I just simply click log off of test user, and now I'm back to me. So again, that's only available to security administrators, and it's a very very powerful tool just to make sure that things are defined properly. We'll go to the security groups function. Same thing as users. We're just defining a series of groups. When I add a group, I can give it a name. I can choose the security group. I could choose the various permissions I want to assign to this group, and you'll see the various types of permissions we can add. All I need to do is just select checkboxes of whatever makes sense to me. Create that security group. Oops. I'll give it a description. Once I've created the group, then I can go ahead and assign one or more users to that group as well. And that's pretty much it. Once I'm in the group, again, I can see how it's defined. So these are the 4 different areas that I've given access to and the different functions. And these are the people that are assigned to it. If I want to edit the properties of the group, I click Edit Properties, which again is going to control what permissions are assigned. If I want to edit the membership, I click Edit Membership, and I can add or remove users from this group. Okay, a couple other functions on the security thing. Task membership. You remember when I was in a user, I can assign them specific tasks. If I want to go ahead and manage differently, if I want to select a task and then add users to it, I can go ahead and do it this way as well. It's just a different way of assigning users to tasks. So I can assign a bunch of users to a specific task, or I can assign a bunch of tasks to a specific user. You can do it either way. When I'm using this will only apply to people who have the specified tasks or specific tasks option selected for that user account. So if they're set up to view all tasks, or if they're set up to view tasks by role, you wouldn't be able to select those users here. A couple other options here. I can manage my report permissions. So by default, each of the reports in iSite have default permissions assigned to them. So each of these reports I can pull up here. I can see what those permissions are. So for each of these reports, if I just hover over this little link here, it'll show me what the permissions are. So I wouldn't be able to run this report unless I had one or more of those permissions for the specific report. But I may want to say, hey, you know what? I want to go ahead and change that. So it says estimating administrator and estimating view. I might want to change it for this report and say, let's lock this down to specific groups instead. So regardless of what their permissions are, if they're in this group, they can go ahead and view this report. Okay. Another thing I can do if I want is I can say, hey, let's go ahead and we'll go to this one. I want to just disable the report altogether. I don't want this report visible to anybody. So I click on that report, I hit disabled. You'll notice when you'll notice when I view this report now, it's got this little icon. So now this icon won't be displayed. But this report won't be displayed in the financials area for anybody. It's disabled. So that's how I can control the permissions of reports within iSite. If I want to see who's currently logged onto the system, I can go ahead and click on the view the active users. This will show you all the people that are logged onto your license. So if you needed to get a hold of somebody, you can go ahead and click on their email address and send them an email if you wish. If I want to import users, again, we talked about the import function on the in the Manage Users page. Same kind of situation. I can upload a file and import those users all at once rather than having to manually add them using the Manage Users function. A couple other things we have access to here. Some of these are available to system administrators. So let's just say you are a customer who uses multiple licenses within iSite. In order to make things a little bit easier, you can actually add users from your other licenses. So the user accounts are already defined. Basically, all you're going to be doing is just copying those users from one license to another to give them access to this license. It's just a nice, quick, and easy way to do that. We have a way to send a couple different messages to users in bulk. I can send a bulk user message, which basically allows me to send a message to the following security groups. And again, I can include help documents if I want to. I can also send a bulk welcome message, which basically will notify them that they now have access to this portal. Same type of thing. I can select the users and then attach a help document if I so choose. And it'll send a nice formatted message to those users. The perform bulk password reset we talked about earlier. And then, of course, the reports. These are various reports within security that allows us to view how we've set up permissions, view permissions that are assigned to users, view how security groups have been created, and so forth. I encourage you to drill into these reports and take a look at these reports as they apply to you. And that basically covers the security settings for iSite.